Let's take our first story of the day. The Department of State Services this past week claimed to have unraveled a plot to impose an interim government on Nigeria. The security agency said the plan is designed to sponsor mass protests, undermine civil rule, and ultimately plunge the country into crisis. In this next report, Arise correspondent Gbenga Ashiru looks at the implications of an interim government as President Buhari continues with plans for a successful transition.
Just like any political transition, there are winners and losers. While the 2023 presidential election ended with Senator Bola Tinubu declared the president-elect, the election has left ripples of disenchantment of allegations of electoral fraud, questioning the sanctity of the ballot. In the days to come, the supporters of the Obedient Movement and the Atiku campaign group have taken to the streets to express their misgivings about the electoral process. The president-elect's move to extend the olive branch did little or nothing to douse the tension. The opposition parties are now at daggers drawn. Not relenting on their demand for justice, the legal fireworks also commenced to seek redress. With the uneasy political atmosphere rising to a fevered pitch, fueling speculations that may put the expected smooth sail of the president-elect to the top seat of power on May 29 under threat. Like the coming to be of a worst nightmare, the latest threat alert from the Department of State Services claims to have uncovered plot to foist an interim government on the nation, once again putting the nation's transition under pressure. If by sheer accident the co-plotters of this interim agenda succeed in their plot, the obvious implications of this arrangement will no doubt set a delicate precedent with a strong reminder of the 1993 interim government set up by the former military dictator, General Ibrahim Babangida. The big question is, what does the interim arrangement portend for the nation's democracy? How would posterity preserve this plot as the nation stands at the threshold of another political transition? Gbenga Ashiru, Arise News.
In a related development, state governors under the auspices of the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, have called for the arrest and prosecution of those plotting to install an interim government and stop the swearing-in of President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu on May 29. A statement issued last Friday by Atiku Bagudu, governor of Kebbi State and chairman of the Progressive Governors Forum, as those governors are referred to, implored all Nigerians to remain vigilant and resist any undemocratic conduct capable of undermining the country's democracy. The statement reads in part, and I quote, "Our country has done well in promoting democracy both in Nigeria and elsewhere in the African continent. And it is sad that some unpatriotic elements are nursing the evil plot for interim government, which will amount to subverting our national democratic progress." End quote. On that same matter, a former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Olisa Agbakoba, senior advocate of Nigeria, has declared that there was no constitutional provision for an interim government in Nigeria, and therefore dismissed the idea as total hogwash. Agbakoba's comments came a day after the Department of State Services issued an alert claiming that some political actors were plotting to bring an interim government into power in order to stop Bola Tinubu from being inaugurated as president of Nigeria. In a communique, Agbakoba declared that those behind the plot must be handed the gravest possible consequences for their treasonable intent, but also admitted that the elections have been held under the most challenging of circumstances. According to him, a president-elect had emerged, a fact which must be respected and accepted. Ahead of the May 29th inauguration of the new administration, the Transitional Committee has assured Nigerians of a smooth handover despite ongoing litigation and threats. Chairman of the committee, Boss Mustafa, says the committee is working hard to ensure that the handover ceremony since the return to democracy will go according to plan.
There will be a formal handover on the 29th of May. It's a constitutional matter, and it has to be resolved. All litigations, whether resolved or unresolved, will not in any way stop the formal transfer of power. President Buhari is not spending a day extra after the 29th. He would hand over power to whoever has been declared by INEC. The court processes will continue, and whatever determination the court does, even after the swearing in, it has always been accommodated. This is not the first time we have run elections. This is not the first time people have assumed offices, and litigations continue. We are doing everything to ensure that the process of the transition is not truncated. Federal government has issued a statement to that effect. The parties that are involved have also issued statements to that effect. But as far as the Presidential Transition Council is concerned, and that's the essence of our setting up the various committees. The Inauguration Committee, which has responsibility for the processes of the inauguration, the swearing in, the parades, the activities preceding the formal handover of power. The Security Facilities and Intelligence Committee has the responsibility to ensure that nothing happens to truncate the process.
Against the backdrop of all those stories, Professor of Political Economy and Management expert Professor Utomi now joins us to look at elections, regime legitimacy, and government performance. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Utomi.
Ruben, it's a great pleasure to be able to join you.
Well, thank you. Well, quickly, I already defined the focus, elections. How did that go? You were a major player there on the platform of the Labour Party and as a leading supporter of the candidate of that party. Now the elections are now over. There are persons who are raising questions about the legitimacy of the process and also about the performance of INEC, the institution. And we now have this general controversy about interim national government and the way forward for Nigeria. So the question is, against the background of what we have seen, who vadis Nigeria?
Thank you. It will be the equivalence of burying your head in the sand to pretend that we don't have, to use the words of Dati Baba Ahmed, a constitutional crisis in Nigeria. I approach it from an even deeper point, and I think you know this, Ruben. My entire engagement with political life is based on what I like to call the meta-narrative. What is it all about? Beyond you win election, you take power, the transactions that go with it. Why do we have a political process? What is it supposed to bring about? Nigeria, unfortunately, has underperformed as a country. Terribly, terribly underperformed. And people don't ask the question, why is this so? Given the talents available in Nigeria, given that we live in an age that Adrian Woolrich calls the aristocracy of talent, why does Nigeria perform so badly? Now, one of the reasons Nigeria performs so badly as a country, poverty capital of the world and all of those things that go with it, is the challenge of legitimacy for those who govern Nigeria. Every 4 years has now become some, stop, what's going on here? Are these the right people? And, we run into this crisis. Unfortunately for us, we are at it again. Let me say that, to make the most important point about elections, it is that they confer legitimacy on those who come out of the process. Simon Martin Lipset, in one of the most important socio-political writings, in the First New Nation, discusses this concept of legitimacy in such a wonderful way. Legitimacy is conferred first by elections and is earned every day by governments when they are in office. And legitimacy can wane, and you get into the politics of power erosion that can lead ultimately to regime failure. This makes elections in a democracy is so important that we must do everything possible to keep any doubt away from the fact that those who emerge from the process are truly those who have come as a result of the will of the people. But as we know, this has not been quite the case in Nigerian history. I mean, the case of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu saying, you know, oh, power is not served a la carte, grab it, run with it. It's actually not original to him. The person I remember who was the original on that was the late Athon Zeribe. I think Athon Zeribe used to say that on election day, whether you even registered to be voted for or not, the important thing is to get somebody to announce that you won the election. Then you can say to them, go to court. Then you can go into office and use state resources to fight that person. Now, this has almost become the pattern with Nigerian politics, that it's almost taking legitimacy away from the process. It's almost made the idea of democracy in Nigeria a laughing matter. People don't think Nigeria is a democracy. And I think that you need to look at the brilliant thought of Reverend Father Professor Anthony Akinwale at the presentation of Fayemi's book, that we are modeling up too many things and pretending Nigeria is a democracy. It is not a democracy. I know it is not. I've participated in the process. I know it is not a democracy. I have been 419 by political parties that I was part of founding, like the APC. I know that it is a completely manipulated process of people who own, quote unquote, the party. So how do we get Nigerians to begin to take the outcomes of elections seriously? Very simple. We've got to find a system that is so transparent, and the electronic process is surely one of the ways, but not the only way, because even it can be sabotaged. But I am even willing to say Nigeria should stop trying to organize elections. Let's ask the UN or somebody, since we're incapable of doing that well. Let's ask some foreign body to come and organize elections. Once it's transparent, I don't think anybody will quarrel about who is emerging from that process.
But Prof, well, yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Opinion is divided on the 2023 general elections in Nigeria. And, you know, INEC has declared Bola Ahmed Tinubu winner of the presidential election. He's now president-elect. The secretary to the government of the Federation has told us nothing will stop the inauguration on May 29, regardless of the fact that, you know, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal is sitting. The law, Section 285 of the Constitution, provides for 180 days for the case to be determined, by which time Bola Ahmed Tinubu will have been installed. Members of the APC are saying the election is over. People should just move on. So, do you think that that government will have a crisis of legitimacy, and how?
Absolutely. We've had coup d'etats in Nigeria. Soldiers are not the only ones who carry out coup d'etats. Civilians can carry out coup d'etats. 2023 election could be a coup d'etat against the Nigerian people. The fact that it has been carried out doesn't necessarily make it legitimate. It might make the fact that the government has come up. You know, in that regard, I have a very simple solution. Look, if we really don't care for democracy, that's okay. No big problem. We have soldiers who come, and who has more power pushes this one out. When you gather enough power, you push out the other one, and we can continue to survive under those circumstances. But if we have got to make believe, you've got to pretend that a government people have worry about is in place, then we begin to go towards understanding why progress is very slow in Nigeria. Can get the geniuses of this world to come. If the people don't believe that that government legitimately serves their interest, the form of cooperation that they can give is such that the kind of progress we desire as a country will not take place. Sadly, we'll continue to be the laughing stock of the world. You know, like I said, all the indicators of progress that we see, Nigeria is there at the bottom, literally, with the kind of resources, especially in human capital, that Nigeria has been gifted with. So it's not a big problem. You can let another coup d'etat, take place by civilians and let it continue. That's fine, but you will see the result down the line. I am actually more worried by some of the things that have come as a result of that process. I'm worried that, people have been made to hate their neighbors because some people are desperate for power. I don't know, have difficulty in thinking of people as different from me because of the language they speak or the religion they preach. And I think my whole life is a track record on that. But I recognize that human beings are also weak and that human beings respond, not only in Nigeria, around the world, to emotions. One of the reasons I'm in the United States is to engage some colleagues who are doing work around reason, emotion, and the gap between us and them. As you know, some of the best work done in that area has been led by Joshua Green at the Center for Moral Cognition in Harvard. They're looking at, why Americans respond the way they respond to the Trump emotional pools and relative to reason, but they have strong institutions that have helped them keep from toppling over in the middle of those kinds of emotional pools. I see, unfortunately, that the need for stereotypes, easy. Oh, this man is a Yoruba man, this man is an Igbo man, that man is a Hausa man, make it deadly for politicians who want to play the game in a country like Nigeria. And I feel that something dramatic needs to be done. If we can go very quickly from a point where some of us were getting so excited, the youth of Nigeria are finally about to rescue Nigeria. I mean, look how they are working at this movement, not caring about ethnic origins, not caring about religion, not caring about... And suddenly, in less than 3 weeks, we went to the gate of Hotel Rwanda. My fear, and I think, Ruben, you do know this, I've written a book already about this from 4 years ago. Nigeria is about to become a fascist state. The rising fascism will totally dominate others. Is what I fear, and the whole world needs to come together to see how to avoid that. Look, what I see developing in Nigeria is clearly the way Hitler evolved in Germany.
Well, Prof.
From the Weimar Republic,
Prof.
The sentiments that drove it produced the kind of fascist movement elected. That the best of Germans, Christians, and all of that suddenly found themselves in an emotional hook to ethnic supremacists that eventually brought the German state to its knees.
Prof, I remember the book you are referring to, your 2020 book titled Why Not, right?
Yes.
State capture,
creeping fascism.
Crippling fascism and
criminal
hijack of politics in Nigeria. You are also on record as having recommended that Nigerians should stage protests, like the orange protests in Ukraine. But we have...
I recommended that in 2007.
We have a fait accompli. There is a president-elect, there is an inauguration process, there is a transition committee in place, and the government is saying, look, nobody should recommend anything that will amount to a disruption of that process. So what is the way forward?
If it pretends to be a democracy, the right to protest is inalienable in a democracy. Whether it is people being sworn in or anything, in a democracy, people have the right to protest if they think something is unjust. Because if you don't, how are institutions built? If you don't push back on wrong, people take it for granted that they will always get away with wrong. That becomes impunity. And so any white policeman that puts his knees on the neck of a black man because he has a certain view of black people can get away with murder. But America mobilizes and the world with them. Black lives matter. Why should Nigerians not say, we're tired of stolen elections? This cannot continue.
Okay,
and
Prof.
they should be able to say it from now till whenever they want.
Okay, Prof. Let me ask you. You talked about people are now afraid of their neighbors, issues of religion and maybe ethnicity in that regard. But look, the part of the narrative in Nigeria today is that there are no saints and that your candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, whom you supported, in fact, some people are saying he used politics of religion during the election.
I'm not talking about politics of religion or politics of this.
But that he played divisive politics.
Hate. I'm talking about inspiring hate and hurt of neighbor.
No, the argument was that religion was used to promote hatred and divide people, and that your candidate was guilty of that.
Hatred was deliberately promoted. Hatred was deliberately promoted. That's a different thing from playing a game of organizing around religion, if you will.
Well,
so completely different things.
Isn't the end result the same?
Not necessarily. We can choose to organize ourselves based on Northern Ireland has been forever separated by religion. People accept the reality that this is this. But the problem was not that the religion separated them. It was that hatred of neighbor of a different religion was preached. Look, Ruben, I lived in Lagos during the Civil War. I was in high school. And we walked around as young people in Surulere. My classmates and friends were from everywhere. 80% of them were Yoruba. When I went to the University of Nigeria to start university in 1973, I led protests that led people to saying, this Yoruba boy. My circle of friends in 1973 at UNN included people like Fulu Ayeni of Tantalizer, Ogidon of The Guardian for long years, Idiot Adesanya, she used to be, she's retired now, engineer Adesanya, a married name I remember in a second. These were the NAFDAC DG. These were my closest friends, Kaido Lukbono, who is a professor at Yale today. I never thought of myself as different. 1993, June 12th, you will recall yourself the role that I played. I didn't think of it, Yoruba, Igbo. But for some of the people that I respect so much, to wake up and rationalize hating, maiming others, I think is a little dangerous and is the effect that bad politics can bring. This is why we have international criminal courts. This is why we had the trials after World War II in Nuremberg, because the damage to our dignity as human persons of the kind of level that politicians who are not mindful of a good social order can promote is bad for society.
Prof, I'm sure you will agree that election is a process. We've had the voting process. Now it's post-election, and the matter will now be determined by the judiciary, from tribunal to court of appeal to the Supreme Court. Millions of people voting. It will now be down to 3 persons, 7 persons at the highest level. Do you have faith in the Nigerian judiciary to do the right thing?
I think that is not a fair way to put the question. The way that we have run our politics has led us to decreasing faith on the judiciary. I even have senior advocates, former NBA presidents, saying they don't have faith in the judiciary. I will not, and I usually do not, make blanket statements, because I believe that human beings invested with the dignity of God make choices. Some may fall to a certain flavor of the moment. Others may see, you look, I've told a story, I think even on your show, of Paris as World War II was ending. And Hitler ordered General von Collitz, who was in charge of the army, French army in Paris, ordered him to destroy the city of Paris. And Collitz looked at himself and thought, why should history remember me as the man who destroyed the most beautiful city in the world? He sent messages to Allied forces to come in quickly and take Paris. And they obviously hesitated because they thought it was a trap. And Hitler saw that he was not burning Paris and was going to send an SS Panzer division to move in on Collitz's Paris. When the news got to Charles de Gaulle, who led a ragtag French Free Forces army, he drove into Paris and took it without resistance. This will happen in the Supreme Court anywhere where human beings are. So I can never dismiss a group of people. I mean, it's like people saying, Yorubas did this. God forbid that I should ever say something like that. Are Yorubas not people like Delirat Farutimi? Are Yorubas not people like Papa Adebanjo? Are Yorubas not people like the many, many people I meet? In fact, and in truth, I tell you, a friend of mine who's CEO of a multinational said to a mutual friend of ours that, look, he thinks something is very wrong with what's going on, but that, hey, if Bola Tinubu is in power, he gives him access as a Yoruba person. So it's better for him to just allow what is going on to go on so that he can have access. And I thought a CEO of a multinational should not think like that. That's what has been different with my own life, because I have chosen not to think like that. As a CEO of a multinational, I came out on the streets of Lagos in protest about the annulment of the election of 1993. I was beaten on the streets by the police. I survived 2 assassination attempts under Abacha because I believed justice and right was right. It didn't matter what my ethnicity was. To see that the people that marched with me on the street today talk differently, really shakes me to my marrows. And believe me, I'm not so sure that if we don't manage this extremely carefully, that Nigeria will come out of it still the same.
Well, I get your point, Professor Utomi, but whatever it is, the position of the Nigerian government is that we have a president-elect, and the process of inauguration is on. And we've been told that nobody should think of any other option. That's just where we are right now. Thank you very much,
The right of a conscientious objector does exist in every democracy. Muhammad Ali refused to go to Vietnam. He was a conscientious objector. I can choose that I don't think that this is a democracy. Maybe this is my current move is prelude to Jackma. Who knows? But hey, sad. But that's the reality that we're dealing with.
Well, many sides to the Nigerian narrative, but we'll see.